Dreams aren't magic tricks, they are blueprints. This is the Thoughts Become Things podcast, where we open the doors to that blueprint and desire to break poverty. Join Moses B. Arthur, the dreamer, the doer, the guy who builds systems from scratch. We are talking business, personal growth, spirituality, the whole shebang. Forget stuffy suits and boring lectures. This is about real talk, actionable steps, and a healthy dose of love and light to fuel your fire. Remember, it shall never be well with poverty, so get ready to turn those what ifs into oh yeah, let's go.
In 2016, I had the opportunity to read a book by a man called Gene Edwards that my man of God, Pastor Robert Obiade, recommended for me to read. The book was called A Tale of Three Kings. And one of the things that the book did for me was it helped me check my heart set as one who was becoming a leader. Heart set, we usually hear of mindset, but we rarely check the word heart set. We rarely talk about heart set. There comes a time and there comes a point in every man's life, especially if that man is a leader or is supposed to lead or is a visionary of or sits in whatever leadership role, where they must choose what kind of king they want to become. And if you think about it very well, it's not the crown that defines you. It's not the throne that qualifies you. It's not the followers that validate you or your calling. It is your heart. When tested, what does your heart actually reveal? And what does your heart really show about who you truly are? And that's the burden of today's conversation. It's one that's actually drawn from one of the most profound spiritual allegories I've ever encountered. And so today we're going to look at A Tale of Three Kings. A Tale of Three Kings. And this is not just a story. For me, A Tale of Three Kings is a mirror. For me, it's a pattern. It's a divine confrontation. It's a tale of a man called Saul, of a man called David, and another called Absalom. There were three kings with three mantles and three hats. And so I'm going to pick each of these kings and I'm going to just draw a few lessons from them. And I hope that it brings you to a place where you want to do a bit of a heart set check, especially if you want to scale and become that influential person, that light that your generation must celebrate. And so let's begin with King Saul. Saul was anointed. He's chosen by God. He's positioned as Israel's first king. But he was a man whose heart never fully submitted. Saul feared men more than he feared God. If you look at it very well, or if you study him, you'd understand what I'm saying. Saul was obsessed with image more than intimacy with God. And when he disobeyed God's clear instruction in 1 Samuel chapter 15, the Bible said God rejected him, but still Saul kept the throne. And this is where one of the great mysteries of life actually is drawn, that sometimes a man can sit in a spiritual position, but no longer carries divine permission from God. That sometimes a man can sit in a spiritual position that no longer carries divine permission from God. And that's Saul. He still had the crown. He had that divine position. He had that spiritual position, but there was no divine permission back in it. Saul had the army. He still had the palace, but the oil had lifted from his head. And yet he kept fighting to look anointed long after God had moved on. And that's the strategy of Saul. He was a man who knew how to throw spears at rising leaders because he was too insecure to examine his own heart. If you are a leader, take note of what I just shared with you about Saul, the tragedy of Saul. He was a man who knew how to throw spears at rising leaders because he was too insecure to examine his own heart. There are some of you listening to me who are leaders, and all you do is to throw spears at the leaders that God is raising in your camp because you are very insecure, or the leaders that God is raising under you, you feel their potentials might outlive yours. That was King Saul, and that was his tragedy. Now let's come to David. So remember that I said it's a tale of three kings. So we're looking at Saul, David, and Absalom. Now let's come to David. David is the shepherd boy. David is the forgotten son, the one overlooked by his father but handpicked by God. David was anointed in obscurity, and yet the oil didn't send him to the throne immediately. What the oil did to David was that it sent him into warfare. It sent David into exile. It sent him into betrayal and years of being misunderstood. But then there's a clear difference with David. David never tried to take the throne, even when Saul hunted him, even when spears were being thrown at him, even when he had a clear chance to kill Saul in the cave. David refused to touch what God had not handed him. And why did David do that? Because he was a man who didn't just have the gift, he had the heart. What was the heart? David had a heart that honored, even when dishonored. David had a heart that waited, even when wronged. David had a heart that was broken enough to be trusted with power. David represents the kind of leader that God can trust, not because he's perfect, but because he's surrendered. So I always tell leaders this. I always tell people who have been put into authority that we are not people who are perfect. But you see, there's something about God. When God finds out that you are surrendered to him, when God finds out that you are yielded to him, when God finds out that no matter your level, you can always be surrendered to him, he comes to you. So David was that leader that was a difference. So in Saul, we learned something about Saul. We learned that Saul was the type of leader, because of his insecurity, started throwing spears at rising leaders. Then we're learning something about David. He was not perfect, but he was completely surrendered. It is what made him unique. Then now, there's Absalom, the son of David. This is very interesting. The son of David, Absalom, ideally crown prince for that matter, because his father, David, is king eventually. David's son, who is Absalom, he's handsome, he's charming, he's eloquent, he's strategic. But there's something about David, his son, Absalom. He's wounded. Absalom was the leader who looked the part but carried hidden offenses. And in today's generation, there are a lot of leaders that show up and look like they are handsome, they are charming, they are eloquent, they are strategic, etc. But they have a lot of hidden offenses in their heart. Absalom stood at the city gate, slowly stealing the hearts of Israel with soft words and unspoken ambition. And that's the danger of unhealed hearts in leadership. They birth rebellion dressed as reformation. They sound righteous, but they are actually driven by resentment. They cry justice, but they are fueled by jealousy. Absalom's rebellion didn't start with a sword. It actually started with a silent campaign against his own father's credibility. And when the time was right, he rose up to take what he felt he was entitled to, without process, without permission, the most painful path, without oil. And in the end, he died hanging from the very thing that made him beautiful, his hair. Let that sink in. In the end, Absalom, he died hanging from the very thing that made him beautiful, his hair. And let that sink in again. What are we looking at? 3 kings, 3 destinies, 3 responses to leadership, pain, process, and power. 3 kings, 3 leaders, 3 destinies, 3 responses to leadership, pain, process, and power. If you have ample time, maybe after today's podcast, you can just, spend a little bit of time and go and read about the stories of these people. One of the things I always say is that whenever God wants to teach a people a possibility in a generation, he hides it in the stories of men. So when God wants to teach you about prayer, he shows you a man who was with like-minded passion like you and I, who prayed fervently. When God wants to teach you favor, he embodies the lessons of favor in men. When God wants to teach you divine speed, he embodies the lessons of divine speed in men. One of the things that I have gleaned from leadership is these 3 people. So I ask you today, not about the title you carry, far away from that. What spirit do you walk in? Are you a Saul, anointed once, but now you are led by fear, ego, and jealousy? It's a very dangerous thing. And there are types of leaders like that, believe you me. The Saul type of leaders, they are anointed once, or they were once anointed, but now they are led by fear of what the people under them can become. They are led by ego. They are led by jealousy. It's a very dangerous type of leadership. Or you are a David who is in a process. You are often wounded, but you are still humble. You are still broken, and you are still obedient. Or you are becoming like Absalom. You are gifted, yet you are wounded and offended. You are gathering influence, but you are building from a place of pain. If you are able to identify these three and separate yourself to know which one you are, it will be very important for you to know, because your response to offense, delay, correction, and exposure will determine the kind of king or leader that you become. I take it again. Your response to offense, delay, correction, and exposure will determine the kind of king or leader that you become. This is why God does not promote by charisma. He promotes by character. God doesn't elevate men by appearance. He elevates by surrendering men, or men who have a surrendered heart. He doesn't use perfect men. He uses yielded vessels. So if God is breaking you, pause and thank Him. Because before God raises a David, He breaks a David. Before He gives you influence, He gives you a cave. Before He hands you a crown, He teaches you to honor the one who may not even deserve it. And if you are in the place, or if you are in a Saul's palace, dodging spears, stay low. If you are in Absalom's shadows, stay clean. And if you are in the wilderness, stay obedient. Because in the tale of three kings, the one who wins is the one who lets God write the stories of their life. So let God write the story of your life, and understand that ultimately, if you keep yourself yielded and surrendered, there is no telling of what you can become. You will become that walking wonder in your generation, and your generation will celebrate and reward you because of the magnitude of impact and blessing that you make. I hope that this one gives you a bit of a sit down as you reflect on the whole concept of leadership, more so the kind of leader you want to become. Do have a blessed day. Love and light. Cheers.
That is another episode down. Remember, dreams aren't wishes. They are seeds you have to plant, water, and nurture. Take today's golden nuggets of wisdom, sprinkle them with your hustle, and watch your garden of greatness bloom. Share your thoughts. Connect with MBA on all social media at The Moses Author. Don't forget to dream, dare, do, and remember, love and light are your superpowers. Until next time, go out there and turn those thoughts into things.